What's up, big dogs? Back again with another 360 rookie review, diving into the next tier of running backs for us. I'm going to kick it off today with Clyde Edwards-helaire. So this is an interesting one. He was someone that I really liked going into the combine. Obviously took a bit of a hit on the combine from his 40 time, but wasn't like a lethal, like 4.7 or anything like that. And then tested extremely well on the burst side. And he didn't test agility, but based on what we see on film, I think that's probably one of his strong suits. So that's not something I'm too worried about. But when we watch this guy play, at least when I was watching him play, one thing that really stood out to me was like his twitch, right? And film grinders love using that term. Like I have my version of it. I'm sure you have your version of it. But it's just like I just love how quickly he shifts and moves and navigates in tight spaces. That's what I mean by my twitch. And I have something called. I'm sorry, no, I didn't come up with this, but I've heard people say it, something called the Clyde slide, and he does it many times, and I'm sure you'll see a couple clips that come up here where he does it, but he basically puts like linebackers on skates whenever he's in the open field. So, from the film perspective, he's really good. From the production standpoint, he's obviously there as well, and we'll get into the numbers a little bit. But Noah, like, what was your initial take before the combine, and then now after the combine? Has any of that changed for you?
I think honestly, Clyde Edwards-helaire had the most comparable combine to what I saw watching him play and the numbers that he put up, right? When you watch the guy play, he gets caught from behind quite a bit. There are a few clips where, it looks like he kind of broke away. There's a guy 10 yards behind him and they catch up.
Yep.
But between the tackles and like you said, the Clyde slide, the agility is there. He didn't test that, but the burst that he shows on tape, he never really loses his speed, right? In between cuts, he gets right back up to full speed. And, he's pulling off spin moves. He's pulling off jukes. He's doing whatever he needs to do. And he's still running pretty quickly. And there's a Brett Coleman video that he put out recently. And whenever this guy puts out a video, I'm like, okay, I need to look a little bit more deeper into this prospect. And he hit every point on the head. It's like, sure, he didn't run a 4.4. He didn't run a 4.5. But the way that he uses his burst in between the tackles and he's able to run off the tackle and use that burst to get to the edge and just pick up, 10 to 12 yards instead of maybe 50. I think NFL teams take a lot more stock into a guy consistently picking up 5 to 6 yards and being able to break a 15-yard run than a guy who has terrible vision, needs a big hole, and then breaks at 60, 70 yards. So what I saw on tape is just a guy who makes men miss in the hole, can catch out of the backfield, is an elite receiver, has great footwork. And I think one of the best parts of his game is just his instincts, right? Even though they had a very good offensive line at LSU, if there was a guy in his face off the snap and he gets it, he almost always made them miss. Whether it was a defensive tackle, a huge fat guy in his face, or a linebacker coming off the edge, he was spinning them out, he was juking them out, and he was picking up the hard-earned yards. And the talk of him being maybe a day 1 pick or a very early day 2 pick, I honestly don't think are that crazy. Sure, he didn't test out to be a crazy athlete, but he produced in the SEC, played a ton of games this past year, won the national championship, and looked good in basically every single one. He dominated Alabama that one game. I think what he put on display this past year is something that coaches want. They want a dynamic player out of the backfield, maybe not as athletic as Eckler. Well, obviously, objectively not as athletic as Eckler, but somebody who brings a very similar skill set. And we know that now in the NFL, they're not really looking for in-between-the-tackles grinders. They're looking for more guys that can do 2 or 3 things. He's not a great blocker, I'll say that, but he can do a few things out of the back. Yeah, he's kind of short. What do you really expect? But he does a lot out of the backfield, and I think that's something that's very coveted in today's NFL. So, yeah, I think he's going to have the draft capital. If he has the landing spot, my bold take, Mike, is I could see him moving all the way up to RB2 for me in this class.
Ooh, wow. Just behind JT, even ahead of Swift?
I
wow.
think if he has a good landing spot, I think that he just has everything he needs aside from breakaway speed. But even then, like, how many times are running backs getting you 60-yard touchdowns in fantasy?
Wow, that's a spicy take. Let's dig into that a little bit more. What would be your ideal landing spot for him?
Mike, I didn't think this up.
Let me throw one out there. What about the Bucks? You like him on the Bucks?
I do like him on the Bucks, Mike. I love him on the Bucks. Because we know that Tom Brady's going to want to throw out of the backfield, get a kind of James White type. Maybe they don't want him there because the pass blocking is a little shiesty. But even if their offensive line isn't that good, which they aren't, he's showed the instincts to make men miss in the hole. I think he would automatically take over that goal line role over a Ronald Jones, and he'd obviously take over the pass down roles. So yeah, I would definitely like him on the Bucks.
Yeah, I think I like him. You're not alone, There's a lot of like well-respected guys in the industry, guys like Jay Moyer, who has Clyde as the like best prospect from a talent perspective. Obviously I think the major risk here is pass pro. Like we don't focus on pass pro that much, but like when we say Clyde Edwards-helaire is bad in pass pro, just go look at some tape. I think maybe the Texas one was one that I saw where like you would see like incredible feet on the offensive side when he gets the ball. He juice like a linebacker, spin moves, like stiff arms the defender, and then you see him on like pass pro the next snap, and he just like face plants into the ground. The guy just like steps over him and then tackles Joe Burrow. So it's pretty funny. But pass pro is something that can be developed, right? Aaron Jones was awful, god awful in pass pro in his first year, and he eventually developed that over time, right? Because the reason why, and I learned this from my man Ray GQ, like college coaches don't give a shit about pass pro, right? Like you're not in there to protect the quarterback, you're in there to get yards and rush and catch passes or whatever.
You
So
saw that in
like,
tight end drills too. Like they don't care about
yeah,
tight ends blocking either. The guys
yeah,
were literally
exactly.
just like bench pressing the dummy instead of actually blocking it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's not something they learn, right? So if you don't get taught it, obviously you're not going to be as good. So if he comes in and gets some of that work with someone, I could definitely see him doing pretty well. And the other thing that really gives me hope about his draft capital is he declared early, right? He's a junior. He could have gone back for another year. He really only has 1 year of production on his profile, but the fact that he declared early tells me that NFL teams love him. It tells me that there was signal from behind the scenes that said like, yo, you're going to get drafted early, right? Otherwise he wouldn't really come out. And obviously there's a risk that he falls, but I think that's another positive signal we can kind of take along with us. And then the one other thing I'd say is that Clyde edwards-helaire competed with John Emery. So for those of you that don't play Devy or don't really follow incoming freshmen, John Emery before this season started was one of the top running back prospects that entered college. He was ranked number 2 in the nation. So a lot of people assumed that he would just immediately take over and become the starting running back for LSU. Obviously, Clyde edwards-helaire said, no, fuck that, stiffed arm in the face and took the job. So I think that's like pretty impressive that he was able to do that over one of the nation's top recruits, despite doing nothing in his freshman and sophomore year. So you saw that growth, similar to Burrow, right? This entire team, you saw that growth that make them leap. You saw Jamar Chase make the leap. Justin Jefferson's actually pretty good last year too, but he also made a massive leap. So, it's just like a lot of positives going on with this team, and we'll find out when they get to the NFL if it was like all smoke and mirrors. I think there is a lot of talent there, though, in terms of the class.
Yeah, and talking about his talent, right? He was 9th in broken tackle percentage this year at 34%. So 1 every 3 carries, pretty much, he was putting somebody on skates. He had the 8th most broken tackles at 73. And when you dive into his numbers a little bit more, his yards after contact, they weren't great. So he was breaking tackles. He wasn't picking up much after, but that kind of just speaks to my former point. Like he has the burst to get away from the first guy. He'll get taken down by the second guy, but those 6-7 yard gains, coaches still like that. They still want guys to get them the first down. That's what Clyde edwards-helaire has in his bag. And here's another bold take, Mike. I would not be surprised if CEH is the highest scoring former LSU back next season.
Whoa.
Love that.
I mean, Leonard
Over
Fournette sucks
Leonard
ass.
Fournette.
No,
They're
but
probably
that's
both going to get hurt, so it's an
yeah,
easy
that would
bet.
be huge. That would be huge if they both played healthy, and I could definitely see that. I mean, depending on where he lands, again, landing spot is so important. But he's a baller, man. Like, look at James White finish as a freaking RB, like top 12 RB, just catching passes, and Clyde edwards-helaire is like 10 times the runner that James White is. So just imagine like James White plus running, which is like why I have the comp. I'm comp to Devonta Freeman because they're kind of similar stature, like bowling ball type, like physical, small but physical runners. And yeah, I mean, it's just like it's always interesting to see like these small guys because it's really hard to comp them. And I know, like, I think Matt Kelly and the Podfather, like his approach is always like, look, if you can't find a historical like comp or someone that set a precedent, like you typically want to avoid those players. And to be honest, it's really hard to find precedents for Clyde edwards-helaire. They have him comp to Chase Edmonds, right? Who obviously is a backup running back. I mean, to me, I think that the most positive outcome for him, I have him profiled as a committee back. So I think he's going to go somewhere as part of a committee and over time kind of develop and eventually take over that lead. I don't see him as someone that's going to like walk in and be like a lead back like day one, unless someone takes him the first, which would be crazy. But like, what do you think? Do you think he just like walks in and is like the dog, or you think it's going to take him some time to get there?
Yeah, it takes him some time to get there, but I also don't think he has to be that type of player to be fantasy relevant. Like you were saying,
Mm-hmm.
right? If he catches 4 or 5 balls a game, he gets, 8, 9 carries, 13, 14 touches total. I think he has the upside and the ability, the skill set to be, a back end RB1 as early as his rookie year if he's put in a good situation. My comp for him, and I know it's not similar stature, he's like 2 or 3 inches shorter, but it's kind of like a Kareem Hunt, somebody who
Mm.
even this year we saw get used heavily out of the backfield. He's kind of like a pinball. He just bounces off of players. He's good with his feet. He's not very fast, but he has good burst to make men miss in the hole and get to the outside. So I could see kind of a similar role to what Hunt had in the latter half of the season when he actually got back from his suspension this year for Clyde edwards-helaire. And we know that
Yep.
he was basically a middling RB2. So if he's put in a good situation that is willing to use him both in the passing game and on the ground, he's going to be a very good fantasy asset going forward.
Definitely. So you're basically saying he would probably take him in the top 5 if he gets a good landing spot, right? Like
Yeah,
you take him ahead of Lamb.
what'd you say? Oh yeah, ahead of Lamb. I probably would. I'd probably take him ahead of Lamb just because I think if Helaire takes a similar path to Devin Singletary of last year, where he was kind of in a committee, but he still rose his stock, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to, and I know this isn't a great comp, but like N'Keal Harry, whose value kind of took a hit. I'd rather
Mm-hmm.
take the bet on a running back raising their value year 1 to year 2 than a wide receiver.
Yeah. So just to be clear, I think we have him at 10th overall in our rankings, but obviously this because we don't know where he's going to land, where he's going to get taken. But if he does get taken, let's say the 2nd round, and he goes to like the Tampa Bay Bucks, for example, like he's definitely going to move up our rank. So keep a lookout for him. I mean, he's like, people say he's not an athlete, but he's got 40-inch vert. I don't know about you, but I can't even jump 10 inches. So that's it. To me, seems like a pretty damn good jump. And that's an 89th percentile burst score. So kind of like what Noah said, like he is kind of similar to Kareem Hunt, right? Kareem Hunt did not run a fast 40, but the burst in the short area spaces is what happens, is what you value most, because like you're just, unless you're Barkley, even when you're Barkley or Chubb, you're just not breaking away like 30, 40 runs in the NFL. Everyone's way too fast. The gaps close way too fast for you to do that. So it's more about getting that chunk yardage, and that's where the burst comes into play.
Yeah, no free ads, but please go check out Brett Coleman's video. He did a fantastic job. He broke down a ton of clips. It's probably actually going to be very similar to what we do here. Maybe not as many stats, but like he broke down every little thing. He's much more in depth in like film grounding than we are.
Mm-hmm.
And Edwards-Helaire, after watching that, I'm like, I got to reevaluate where I have this guy, because I think at the next level, like coaches just want a guy like Clyde, and they're going to put him out in the field because he can make plays. Even if they're not 50-yard plays, he can make 15-yard plays. And that's still very, very valuable for real life football.
Yeah, film grinders love Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and I know I trip on them all the time, but I have a ton of respect for a lot of the film grinders. You know, Noah's a fucking film grinder by trade as well.
Barely.
So I rely on his film. You know, Jay Moyer, like I said before, Brett Coleman, just like all these guys are just really good at what they do. You just got to follow the right ones, in my opinion, and you know the right ones do tend to love him, and I do place weight in that. So get excited, man. There's a chance that you might land someone like Clyde Edwards-Helaire at the bottom part of the first, and that's just like super exciting because in another class, I think you'd be a top 5 lock, no problem. But
yeah, one other thing I would like to say too is like even if you land him at the back half of the first and you think it's not a good landing spot, look at a guy like Austin Eckler, right? Going into the league, he was undrafted. It's obviously a completely different situation, but you didn't think much of Eckler. He was cemented behind a Melvin Gordon. A holdout, it's becoming very common now in the NFL. Older guys are getting injured, especially if they're pounders in between the tackles. Like even if you get him at the back half of the first in a bad landing spot, he could theoretically jump the first guy and become very valuable. So I'm not passing. Even if he lands in a terrible spot and he's the clear backup, I'm probably not going to let him get out of the first round either way.
Yep, definitely. Totally agree with you there. That's it for Clyde. Hopefully you guys found that helpful. You know, we'll be posting these up in the Discord channel, so make sure you join up on that. But we'll be getting up into one of my favorite players next.
Best player in this class. You'll have to wait and see. We're not going to tell you.
See you next time.